Good afternoon and welcome to the Met Council Transportation Committee meeting for October 28th, 2024. Our first order of business is approval of the agenda. If there's no changes or additions, we can proceed. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our second, which is approval of the October 14th committee meeting minutes. Did anyone have changes or additions? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Morales. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Councilmember Tony Carter. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the minutes are adopted. Now I'm going to turn it over to Metro Transit General Manager Leslie Kinderis for employee recognition.
Thank you, Chair Barber, council members. Today we are recognizing 3 staff from our rail team. 2 of the people we are recognizing today are here for their work implementing Minnesota's risk-based inspection program, which uses data analysis to identify safety concerns. Their work helped the state become the first in the nation to receive Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, certification. The 3rd member of the team we are recognizing here today is being applauded for work developing a supply chain process that is more economical and helps maintain the availability of fleet parts. So with Chair Barber's permission, I'd like to turn it over to Ed Meyer, the Director of Rail Technical Support, to introduce the group and tell us more about their work.
Hello, Chair Barber and council members. Ed Meyer. I'd like to introduce Drew Choicer Goodrich. He's our Manager of Quality Assurance. Henry Stephenson, our Rail Data Analyst Intern, and Joe Warble, our Engineer. So Henry and Drew worked on, like Leslie said, there was a FTA mandate, a special directive to change how state safety oversight watch the agencies that they had oversight of and become more data driven with their oversight. So Drew worked with Henry, our internal IS/IT partners, Andrew, and developed using technology we currently use at the council, Microsoft Teams site. Took all our internal data, built several dashboards that are required of the program, communication protocol, and kind of an agreement with the state of how we're going to communicate if they have questions with the data they're seeing. So now with this site that Drew's built, the state can log in and see real time the same thing our internal partners are seeing. So, and like Leslie said, we were the first in the country to get that approval for this program. And Drew did present to an FTA to the regional directors how he built the program that he did. So they're gonna kind of use some of our ideas as a template across the country. Joe Warble, Joe's our senior rail vehicle engineer. He's a one-man department. Joe is about 5 years at the council. He came to us from overhead cranes, so anytime big infrastructure project, Joe's team set up the crane, took it down, placed the crane. So Joe's known for solving the complex technical problems on our 118 car fleet. We have 3 different series of cars. In March of 23, we had several cars failing due to a door control problem. So here's a picture of a door control unit. It's in every door portal. I'll hand it around. And the backside is kind of the circuitry inside of that control unit. But Joe worked, we had several units we sent out to a vendor, and their idea for a fix was you should purchase new ones. So Joe worked with our frontline staff and management to identify the root cause of the issue, documented it. He sourced all the parts, came up with a repair process, a local vendor that we used to repair these, and then a testing protocol when the unit was returned. So using Joe's methodology, he saved us about $340,000 so far. We've had about 90 units sent out and returned to service and repaired. So just like to thank Joe, Henry, and Drew for their innovation and commitment to safety and availability of our fleet. So thank you.
Some plaques for you, gentlemen. Thank you for all you do. You have to stay in order because that's how I remember. Here you go.
It's just the
Thank you.
computer.
Thank you for all you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nice job.
All right. Again, thank you very much for all your hard work. It's very impressive. Now, first, before we proceed, we do have somebody who's here wants to address us tonight. We have Gregory Vanderblog here. If you can keep your comments to about 3 minutes, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Elaine, for being here. I am the 7th Ward. I live in 314 Hennepin Avenue. We lately found out about the plans for transferring buses from Nicollet Avenue. We live in a building where people have severe mobility issues. We need that mall to walk down, to use services, particularly Target, Walgreens, get groceries. It's too difficult if they move buses off those streets from people with mobility issues to go to Arquette or Second Avenue. I take the bus all the time. It's not only people with mobility issues, young mothers with children and strollers. They have to use Target, Walgreens, and they need those services. People still work and go to work. And I think particularly the 18, 10, 11, 17, from all those areas of the city, they come down here, and then particularly in those areas, this is the only place for people to shop, and they still need those services. And I lived quite a bit in Minnesota. I remember 1960, I believe, Victor Gruen designed the mall. I don't know, I was there at the time. I could have been in a little stroller maybe, going down the mall. I could have been working there sometime in my youth, going to work in the business possibly. I was there, and now I'm old and with mobility issues and old age. We still need buses. Buses are always on Nicollet. I think they could accommodate all the services, all the things we want for people to have fun aspects of going to Nicollet Mall without actually having the buses removed from that. That is not a necessary component. Also, remember that in the winter, that's very severe for people that issues. And also, I do actually, incredibly as it is, I still have to work a little bit, and I still take the buses late at night. Now, late at night, it's a good thing to have those buses on Nicollet Mall because Nicollet Mall is very dark, and the lighting, and particularly the restaurants are still open. There is some activity over there. You notice that we're in a protection because in Hennepin, there are a lot of people there where they protect themselves from a lot of activity to see what's going on. But Nicollet is very, very dark, and I think that little helps a little bit because I think having buses still running on Nicollet helps on all those issues. But people in my building particularly have severe mobility issues. They have difficulty. They need to go to Target. They have groceries and Walgreens. We hope these big stores are still going to be open as long as they can. And Walgreens still needs a service for all people all over the city. They need, if you know, retail. They have retail needs people from all walks of life. They cannot survive without people from getting common things. You know, it's not just a specter. And so that sums up the issue. I like to, again, because our main concern with my building, everyone I talk to, they're very concerned about mobility. That's our big concern on my building. But as again, I talk to other people, see other people, there are other concerns as well. I think we should consider this before we decide to go the gigantic step of moving these buses to other areas of Marquette and Second. And so thank you for allow me to address these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will just let you know that right now, this is actually with the city of Minneapolis. It's not to us, so we'll make sure your comments and your name gets passed along, so it can be part of the comment package that they have over there. We're also sort of waiting to see where they head with it as well, so,
Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right, now we are on to reports, and we'll start with MTS Services Executive Director Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, council members. One update on our Metropolitan Highway System. So good news, last week, the U.S. Department of Transportation announced a $138 million grant to MnDOT for completion of a vision for easy pass lanes along I-494. So last week's announcement actually completes funding for the project and comes amongst $4.2 billion nationwide of grants for large infrastructure projects. This one was funded from a program that's called the Infrastructure for Rebuilding America program, also known as INFRA. So MnDOT began work on phase one of this project on 494 last year. This funding completes the full vision that is comprised of 4 projects that would total $377 million for the project that'll be completed in the years ahead, going from the airport to Highway 169. So a long stretch, a lot of work underway, more work coming thanks to this grant. And the Met Council is pleased to be a joint applicant with MnDOT for this funding. In addition to easy pass lanes, the projects improve safety, reduce worn pavement and bridges, improves the pedestrian network, and upgrades intersections and signals, including for Metro BRT operations. So a step upcoming for this committee will be to amend the TIP to incorporate this project and unlock these funds, which we're anticipating to come before the body in January. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments? I'm scared to ask how much longer the construction will be going, because that is my commute route, but it will be much better when it's done. All right, if there's no other questions, we'll turn to Metro Transit General Manager Candaris.
Chair Barber, council members, just a brief heads up. At last week's Met Council meeting, staff provided an update on the fare collection system upgrade as part of an update on potential fare policy changes. And related to opportunities coming with our fare collection upgrade, Metro Transit's marketing department is preparing to launch a short online survey relating to our go-to card fare product. This survey will assist us as we explore possible opportunities to refresh that go-to brand. The survey will be open to employees and riders for the next week to gather ideas for a new fare product name, or for that matter, to let us know that we should keep the name Go-To. So at this point, just sharing it to put it on your radar in case somebody asks or mentions the survey to you, and we'll certainly keep you posted as work moves forward to potentially change that Go-To brand. So with that, I'd take any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions? All right, then we go to our next report, which is our TAB report. We have Mr. DeGan here.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone, honored council members. Of course, General Manager Cantaris, and of course, Jenna, thank you. Okay, what I thought I'd do today is, last week at TAB, we had, a presentation on the state strategic highway safety plan for the state. And I want to thank Chair Barber and Executive Director Carlson for bringing this to my attention as something perhaps that your committee may just, this is just going to be, 20,000 feet. Every 5 years, the MnDOT has to do a safety plan. They call it a strategic SHSP. Everything's got an initial. But what's great about Minnesota is they're not looking at it as just checking the box and sending something in. They're really trying to do something, MnDOT and all the agencies, and of course the Met Council. It is if you will, it's the general manager of all state safety plans, local, regional, state. And what's new in it is they've elevated 3 aspects of traditional safety to more prominence. One is best practices from across the country. Another is raising or elevating the importance of equity and the needs of vulnerable populations. And MnDOT, that's its primary theme in the plan. And it's also what I personally found interesting was it's embracing social norming and behavior change as to how we drive. Thus far on Minnesota roads, there have been, through October 25th, there have been 382 severe fatalities caused primarily by speed, impairment, and inattentive driving. I think that's probably pretty, we would all get the same impression. And at the TAB meeting, sorry, I have my back to you, I don't know what. At the TAB meeting, one of the questions raised was, what's causing this? We can go to COVID and we can go to other things, the way people are driving and, suppressed anger, if you will. But they, couple of folks focused on enforcement. And so I thought I just did some research on enforcement just to give you some overall statistics. The 259 law enforcement agencies in Minnesota in 2023 wrote 68,720 odd tickets. In terms of not strategy, but in terms of enforcement, the state police are down about 70 troopers as of their last graduation. According to the Minnesota Law Enforcement Labor Services, which tracks law enforcement employment or throughout the Minnesota, there are 204 understaffed police departments in Minnesota. For instance, Minneapolis requires per charter 731 sworn officers. They now have 582 and 500 are patrol. Minnetonka is looking to add 6 in 2024, Edina 6 in 2024, Golden Valley 3 this year, but they're down 12 of their 31 authorized. And Brooklyn Center down 20%. And I know Captain Dodd says is here, but I don't want to, but I know that it is said that the budget for 171 officers, but only 107 on the force at this time, sir? Yes, okay. And in regard to the need of working for safety of the vulnerable populations, people of color, Black, Indigenous, and others, this is from one of the pages. This is from one of the sources of information for the safety report. Areas with high poverty rates have 3.9 times as many fatal and injury pedestrian crashes per square miles as high-income areas. Areas where the majority of residents are Black, Indigenous, and people of color have almost 9 times as many fatal and injury pedestrian crashes per square mile as majority white areas. Thought that was quite interesting, and that's the approach they're going to take. Not the approach. It will be one of the focus points of how do we address it, what are the causes, how do we address it, and yeah, that's and I thought I would end with the long page. Sorry, I have. Oh, and while I'm doing this, the target for why can't I find it? There was sorry, folks, because I thought this was one of them. The target for 225 is 225 deaths. Not sure we're going to make that, but anyway, okay. What I thought was most interesting are the trends in statewide crashes. The increasing causes of fatalities and serious injuries are unlicensed drivers, pedestrians, head-on, and commercial vehicles. The top is intersections, and then impairment and speed, and other ones that are rising, but not as much as the first ones I mentioned, are older drivers, motorcycles, younger drivers, and if you can believe it, unbelted occupants. Okay, and lastly, I'd like to, with the good news, In your summary report from Elaine Kasoukalis, which is always excellent, and Jenna is responsible for it as well. Thank you, Jenna. There, under the MAC report, it mentions an award from J.D. Power to the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. And what that award is from J.D. Power is the North American Airport Satisfaction Rating for all mega airports in the country. Mega airports are 33 million passengers per year. MSP is number 1. Wayne County, that's Detroit. Number 2, Phoenix, JFK, and Dallas-Fort Worth. So congratulations to you folks under whom the MAC and the MSP work. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councilmember Vento.
I really appreciate your presentation, Peter. It's very informative. As one of those elderly people, I want to confess that many times when I'm driving, I am watching driving patterns as well as pedestrian patterns.
Good.
And I see drivers of all sorts, not even going through a rolling stop, but just continuing as though the red light or the stop sign isn't intended for them. So I truly understand that the deaths are related to some pretty bad driving habits. I would also like to point out that pedestrians, bicyclists, folks who use scooters, many of them have some pretty bad habits. I don't want to generalize and blame it on everybody, but I regularly come into council meetings on side streets through the east side of St. Paul. And when I'm on East 7th Street, I am so on edge because there are people crossing at crosswalks when I've got a green light and they're walking across it on a red. There are folks on bikes and scooters weaving in and out of lanes, and it's dangerous. So my only point is I'd like to really encourage us to remember that all of us have a responsibility for this safety. So,
Thank you. And
sorry for this sermon.
thank you,
Additional
Madam.
questions, comments? I'll just add on, one comment we keep getting as part of our MnDOT agency report is one of the areas that are seen unsafe behavior and high speeds and things is through construction zones. It's been a significant problem. They said it's been really, really bad this last summer. And so it's like, I may complain about road construction, but you have to respect the people who are out there doing all that work. So anyhow.
Madam Chair, if I thank you for bringing that up, and thank you, Councilmember Vento. I neglected to mention that, unfortunately, Minnesota ranks number 8 in terms of work zone fatalities.
All right, very good. All right.
Yes, thank you, Madam
Peter.
Chair.
So now we can move on to our business. Tonight we have 6 items on consent. So the first thing I do is entertain a motion to approve the items on consent.
Motion to approve.
Moved by Councilmember Chambliss, second by Councilmember Morales. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the consent items are adopted. On to our first non-consent business item is business item 2024-263, which is joint powers agreement with the Minnetonka Police Department and Metro Transit Police Department, and we have Captain Dotseth here.
Chair Barber, council members, good evening. My name is Joe Dotseth. I'm the interim chief of police at Metro Transit, and I'm here this evening to present business item 2024-263, which is a joint powers agreement with the city of Minnetonka. Our proposed action is that the council authorizes the regional administrator to execute a JPA with the city of Minnetonka. Some brief background on this business item here. MTPD has entered into mutual aid agreements with other agencies. In fact, we've been coming to this committee and full council on many projects. Most recently, we had a Gold Line business item come through to work on JPAs with our partners along the Gold Line. In Hennepin County, we've been operating on this older contract number 15M004 with the previous business item number of 2015-161. So essentially in Hennepin County, and really all of our partners, we've been refreshing our joint powers agreements with a standard agreement that we came up with our partners at OGC and the procurement office. So this business item is really addressing a new item with the city of Minnetonka. The rationale for this is that the state statute and council procurement policy requires that all joint powers agreements be authorized by the council. And then just as a funding aspect of it, there is no funding attached to this. It's kind of a non-standard agreement where we're addressing language and roles and responsibilities within that.
Councilmember Carter.
Thank you very much for the ongoing work to establish these kind of critical partnerships that make the work for all of us. I wonder, though, I just wanted to be clear, you had stated that you're replacing old agreements, in some cases, with this new standard language, and you spoke about the work that's been done already, and now this one. Can I ask if the agreements are now all the same, or are there nuances between different departments, or nuances that, or things that change from one to the other?
Chair Barber, Councilmember, great question. In fact, there usually are some nuances, so after this items get approved, we'll use the goal line, for example. Those items have been approved by council, but we do need to work back with the partners. There's always some small differences. For example, I know in Washington County, we're working on that agreement, and just how we dispatch and work through partnerships, there's always gonna be some small nuances. That's kind of why we have to come to council and do all these ones here, because there will be some small differences between each city and county. But great question, but generally speaking, there's a standard agreement, a template that at least we start out with, and then work through the red lines of the contract.
All right. We can't expect those differences, though.
Correct.
And when they are larger, I would expect that you would highlight for us, so there must not be very many big differences in each of these as they come forward.
Chair Barber, Councilmember, great question again. Yeah, if there's any large differences that we go back to, I certainly would go back to and speak to the general manager about that, or work through procurement and the changes. Most of the agencies to date, there's just been small differences, but if there was any
Configuration of
significant
the
stuff, yes, we would definitely come back to council and talk about that.
Thank you very much.
All right, additional questions, comments? All right, seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve of the business item 2024-263.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Councilmember Carter, second by Councilmember Morales. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, and also want to thank you for your willingness to step in and as interim chief right now. We appreciate your service.
Great, my pleasure, thank you.
All right, on to our second business item 2024-279, which is the Metro G Line Engineering and Construction Administration Services Contract. We have Evan Owens Ambrosio. Oh, and Katie Roth.
Good afternoon, Chair Barber and council members. Before these next two items proceed, I just wanted to provide a little bit of brief background on what each of these two contracts entails, because we are in the position of bringing forward two design-related contracts on two different ABRT corridors tonight. And so just a little bit of background about this. The G Line item, which Evan will present, follows the standard approach we've taken since the C Line, wherein we have a single contract for preliminary design, engineering, and construction administration services. I do want to note that this contract award is moving forward in parallel to the completion of the planning phase on the G Line. You'll recall that in September, this body and the council authorized release of a recommended corridor plan to initiate a public comment period on the G Line corridor. That wrapped up on Friday. Staff are currently going through those comments and plan to bring forward a final plan for council approval in January for the G Line. Advancing the engineering contract for the G Line at this point allows staff to get in place the technical resources that we will need in order to advance the detailed engineering once that corridor plan is approved. So that is the G Line portion, the next item. After that, I will present an H Line item that represents a new contracting approach within arterial BRT, wherein we're bringing on more significant consultant resources earlier in the process to support the planning phase, which has not yet begun on that project. This newer direction is representative really of a continuous improvement approach to having more information sooner to support collaboration with our partners and the public process. I'll also note that it's made possible in part by the bonds that the legislature allocated to ABRT in 2023, as well as by the fact that we are able to plan ahead when we have 3 corridors in the pipeline since the council approved the F, G, and H lines in 2021. So slightly different contracts for 2 different corridors. Just wanted to provide that background, and with that, I will hand it over to Evan for the G Line item.
All right, thanks, Katie, and thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. So the action now before the committee today is business item 2024-279, which is to award and execute contract 24P076 with Kimley Horn and Associates for design, engineering, and construction administration for the Metro G Line project in the amount not to exceed $11,031,025. The Metro G Line is a planned arterial BRT project that will operate on an 11.5-mile corridor within the cities of Little Canada, Maplewood, Roseville, St. Paul, and West St. Paul, bordering Inver Grove Heights. The G line is planned to stop at approximately 32 locations along the route from Little Canada through downtown St. Paul to the Dakota County Northern Service Center, mainly along Rice Street and Robert Street. The scope outlined in this contract provides engineering and construction administration services throughout the entire project, from preliminary design through construction closeout for the planned station locations and supporting infrastructure throughout the corridor. Following the award and execution of the contract, project design and engineering will begin this winter and continue up to final design, which is expected to conclude in Q4 of 2025. Construction is anticipated to occur in 2026 through 2028, with the G line opening in 2 phases, with phase 1 including the segment north of downtown St. Paul, opening for revenue service in 2027, and phase 2 including the segment south of downtown St. Paul, opening for revenue service in 2028. A request for proposals was issued on April 24th, 2024. A pre-proposal meeting was hosted by council staff and outlined the solicitation requirements, discussed project specifications, and responded to the plan holder inquiries. There were 20 registered plan holders, 18 consultants, 1 subcontractor, 1 plan room, and 8 of the plan holders identified as minority, women, small, veteran, or disadvantaged business enterprises. The council did receive 3 proposals to be evaluated for the consideration of award. In accordance with the Brooks Act, the evaluation of proposals followed a 2-step process. An evaluation panel representing council staff ranked and selected the most technically qualified proposer. Following approval of the evaluation panel findings, conclusions, and recommendations, the costing data of the highest ranking proposer was reviewed by a negotiation panel that negotiated pricing and agreed that the final prices have been determined to be fair and reasonable. The negotiation panel recommended Kinley Horn and Associates proposal as the most advantageous to the council. The Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity set a disadvantaged business enterprise goal of 23% and determined that Kinley Horn and Associates had met the DB requirements of this contract. Therefore, Madam Chair, the action before the committee today is to authorize the regional administrator to award and execute contract 24P076 with Kinley Horn and Associates for design, engineering, and construction administration of the Metro G Line project in the amount not to exceed $11,031,025. And then with that, Madam Chair and committee members, I'd be happy to answer any questions you'd have.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council members? All right, seeing none, then I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-279.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Vento, second by Councilmember Morales. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. And back to you.
All right, Madam Chair and council members, business item 2024-259 deals with the Metro H line as noted. This is the planned BRT line that would provide service between downtown Minneapolis along Como and Maryland Avenues, terminating at the Sunray Transit Center in St. Paul, largely replacing Route 3 today in that corridor. So as noted earlier, we are seeking consultant support for planning and concept design services during the planning phase of this project. An RFP was issued on May 22nd of this year. A pre-proposal meeting was hosted on June 5th. There were 18 registered plan holders on the project, and 6 of those identified as minority, woman, veteran, small, or disadvantaged business enterprises. We received 3 proposals for consideration of award. Similarly to the G-Line contract that was just presented, in accordance with the Brooks Act, there was a 2-step process that was followed in evaluation. A panel comprised of council staff and our local agency partners reviewed and selected the most technically qualified proposer. And secondly, the negotiation panel reviewed the costing data of the highest ranked proposer and agreed that the final prices have been determined to be fair and reasonable. The SRF Consulting Group proposal is recommended as the most advantageous to the council. I'll also note that OEO set a DBE goal of 22% on this contract and determined that SRF has met the DBE requirements of this contract. So, Madam Chair, the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contract 24P110 with SRF Consulting Group Incorporated for planning support and concept design services for the Metro H-Line project in the amount not to exceed $1,549,979.
Thank you, Katie. Questions, comments? Councilmember Carter.
One comment, just so exciting to see these configurations coming together, and thank you so much for the work to ensure these projects move forward. Speaking to the one before as well, thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo that. It's a good day for fast, reliable transit on the east side. So we like that. Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair. Katie, I'm curious about what are the partner benefits you'd like to get from the consulting on collaboration?
Madam Chair and Council Member, we've worked with a lot of different partners at the county and city level in particular to incorporate not only BRT design, but also to consider how BRT stations fit in with a broader set of transportation improvements. Oftentimes that means needing to do a little bit more design work to understand how those pieces would fit together as we make decisions about where transit infrastructure would be located. So for example, with a bikeway project in a corridor, having a little bit more consultant resource at the front end allows us to really more comprehensively collaborate with our partners earlier in the process to get a really good product that everyone is on board with. So that's an example of some of the rationale for wanting to have a more robust amount of technical resource earlier in the process.
Okay, thank you.
All right, additional questions, comments? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-259.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Morales. Is there a second?
Second.
And by Councilmember Chambliss. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, now we are on to our two items related to the fair policy changes, business item 2024-304 and 305. And we have Dennis Dworshak and Jillian Linnell here, and Charles. I don't know who's presenting. We are doing although this was at council last week, we're doing a shortened presentation for everyone tonight.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Barber, council members. As noted, Jillian Linnell, Chief of Staff for Metro Transit.
Dennis Dworshak, Senior Manager, Revenue Operations.
And Charles Carlson, Executive Director, MTS. I'll be filling in on one slide, so I'll stay there.
But as noted, we're here to present proposed fair policy changes that will correspond to two business items on today's agenda. The first business item is 2024-304, which covers the proposed fair policy changes, and 2024-305, which is the approval of the results of the corresponding Title VI analysis. So this presentation will serve as background for both of those items. And we do want to just note, as mentioned, this is a subset of slides that were presented last week at council as part of an information item, but we'll quickly cover some of the high-level notes. So the first slide just is a quick overview of why we're looking at making some of these fair policy changes right now. There's a number of benefits. Some of them are highlighted on this slide. So first and foremost, these are really targeted improvements to help improve the overall customer experience. The overall fair payment structure will be easier for riders to understand and interact with, and hopefully improve their overall experience on the system. That will also help improve or increase our overall ridership. Some of the proposed changes are also adapting the peak hours, that we are removing the peak hour, which is in response to the post-COVID ridership trends that we're seeing, and will help encourage riders back onto the network. Other improvements that we're targeting with these proposed changes include improvements to safety for both our operators and our riders, and equity improvements with the removal of the peak surcharge. All right, so this is just a high-level look at some of the related items that are all currently working their way through processes that relate to fair and fair policy. So at the top of this kind of flowchart, you have a quick look at the fair policy changes. We've actually broken this out into two different phases, which I'll cover in more detail on the following slide. But those are concurrently working right now, along with the cubic system upgrade, which is currently underway and which is critical for enabling some of the larger fair policy changes that we're hoping to kind of explore in the phase 2 portion of the fair policy changes. Do you want to mention anything else on?
Sure. And for the cubic fare system upgrade, that's broken down into two different phases. The first phase, technology phase, started last February. We completed the requirements for this phase, and then now we're working, and starting beginning of next year, we'll start seeing some of the customer-facing improvements for the system. So we're really looking forward to that. That'll take place through Q3 of 2026.
And then finally, the third kind of swim lane on this diagram, the free fare pilot. As a reminder, this is the legislatively required pilot program, provide transit service for free on 2 regular route bus lines, which we identified as the 32 and the 62, and to provide regular route transit free of charge for Metmo customers. So this pilot is currently underway, but is set to conclude on December 31st, 2024. And then as part of that legislative requirement, we are also required to submit a report to the legislature on February 15th. So just a high-level look. Looking more closely at the proposed fare policy changes, as noted, we've broken this out into 2 different phases. The first phase, which is what we are bringing forward today as a business item, are really some near-term fare policy opportunities that we've identified. So this is a collection of Metro Transit and Metro Mobility fare policy changes that offer near-term benefits to our riders, address current ridership trends, and that can be implemented in January of 2025. Phase 2 is what we are looking at is a far more comprehensive fare policy review. So as part of the overall fare collection system upgrade, we also have Clever Consulting Group and council stakeholders are currently undertaking a much more comprehensive fare policy review and looking at not only what is available with the new technology, but what the industry standards are, and really looking more broadly at opportunities that we have to make more transformative changes to our fare policy. Some of the possible changes that are being explored through that review include open payment, transfer policy changes, fare capping, elimination of Peak Express, additional evaluation of our past programs, and more. So that work is currently underway, but we are hoping to come back to the council in the middle of 2025 with with a possible proposal for additional changes.
Excuse me. The fare simplification basically is going to be removing the local peak fares. Local peak fares for both the regular customers and for our reduced customers. Reduced customers are the ages from 6 to 12 and 65 plus. Right now, it's $2.50 during AM and PM. That's going to go down to $2 for our regular customers. For reduced fare, it's $2.50 again, AM, PM. That's going to go down to $1. We're also eliminate some of the past programs that have these peak fares included in it. Some of them are going to be the all-day pass for the adults, the reduced fare 7-day passes, and the 10-ride passes. We'll also eliminate the 31-day and the visitor passes. In phase one, we're not going to touch the express fares, the North Star, the Metro Micro, and the Transit Link or the downtown zone. Transit Assistant Program improvements, we're also going to be improving our TAP program run by Andrea. We're working really hard on it over the last year. We're going to be increasing the eligibility from a 1-year eligibility to a 2-year eligibility. That's going to be significant for both our customers and for our staff because there's a lot of back office and a lot of logistics that are involved in that. We're also increasing the TAP utilization. We're adding more staff to help improve this program, and we're signing on charitable organizations. Charitable organizations are partners that help us sign on customers. By the beginning of last week, we had 21, and now we have 22 additional TAP partner agreements signed just this year alone.
Madam Chair and council members, within the MTS side of things, as a reminder, Metro Mobility is really a complement to the fixed route system, and as a result, it is governed by a number of federal as well as state requirements. One of those requirements is that the peak fare may not exceed more than 2 times the local bus fare. And so with this change, we'd be reducing the peak fare on Metro Mobility from $4.50 to $4, which would be 2 times the new all-day $2 local fare. So it follows the fixed route system. With this change, we also have an opportunity to better align peak hours with peak demand and capacity constraints on Metro Mobility. because there wouldn't be a local peak at any longer. So we do remain heavily peaked on Metro Mobility, but that peak is not aligned with the current peak hours on the local bus system. What we're proposing is to shift to better align with peak demand and Metro Mobility. That would be 6:30 to 9:30 a.m. and 2 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. So no increase in the hours of peak service, but a shift to better align with demand so that we can provide better service as well as an incentive to travel in off-peak. We would also be adding a new Transit Link circulator fare. So this is a new service that we've begun on a pilot basis. This would establish the fare for that service, which would be $1 each way, and then it corresponds to a $2 round-trip fare in the communities that we are operating this, which is one so far. Hopefully we can add more, but currently Waconia and Norwood Young America are where we're running these services 1 day a week. Then finally, we'd be introducing a 6-month pilot of a deeply discounted fare, very deeply, 1 cent per ride for Metro Mobility certified customers who are using fixed route. Right now, we're on a legislative required free pilot. This has been a successful program. Over 60,000 people have taken rides on buses and trains who would otherwise qualify for Metro Mobility. It has not increased operating costs on the base system. This has been a great success. We're unable to continue that after the current pilot expires as required by the legislature on December 31st, but we can institute a 6-month pilot at 1 cent in hopes that the legislature will take a look at this program and decide whether they want to continue it on a free basis. In the meantime, we have authority to do a 1 cent pilot.
Title VI analysis. We did complete the Title VI analysis. We got the results back end of last week. The Title VI analysis included the removal of peak fares, removal of local peak, and the end of the pilot route 32 and 62. We did pass the Title VI analysis, and we are authorized to proceed. The Transit Link, the deep discount is not required because that's not federally mandated to be included in the federal in the analysis.
All right, so just looking, before we wrap up, the next steps regarding each of these kind of items that we're looking at regarding phase 1, following today's meeting, if action moves forward, the fare policy, the phase 1 of the proposed changes would go before the council on November 13th. This would allow both Metro Mobility and Metro Transit to move forward and implement these changes at the beginning of the year, with the 6-month pilot kicking off on January 1st, 2025. Just a note here that the TAP program changes would be the only portion that is not going into effect at the beginning of the year. That would actually be implemented later in 2025 once the technology is in place to enable that 2-year eligibility period. As noted on the fare policy on the phase 2, we'll return to the council in mid-2025 with additional details and a possible comprehensive fare policy proposal. And then on the free fare pilot, we're looking to begin communicating the end of this free fare pilot in November with the discontinuation of the free fares taking place on January 1st, 2025, and the legislative report due on February 15th. So more to come. So with that, Madam Chair, the first action before the committee under business item 2024-304, the fare policy changes, moves that the Metropolitan Council approve the following fare policy changes. So please, patient with me for a second. All right. So the removal of local peak rush hour fares, reducing the fare from $2.50 to $2, and peak reduced fares from $2.50 to $1 for all regional transit providers participating in the regional fare structure, and adjust the following fare products for the all-day pass from $5 to $4, the reduced fare all-day pass from $5 to $2, the 10-ride pass full fare from $20.50 to $20, the 7-day pass from $24 to $20, and the elimination of the 31-day pass local peak and the visitor pass. We'll also move to modify the Metro Mobility peak fares from $4.50 to $4, modify Metro Mobility peak fare hours to 6:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. in the morning and 2 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. in the evening. The expansion of the Transit Assistance Program eligibility from 1 to 2 years to be implemented in 2025 once the fare technology is available. The approval of a 6-month deeply discounted fare pilot for Metro Mobility customers to ride on regional fixed route for Ascent effective January 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2025. The provision of a new fare of $1 for Transit Link circulator service. And unless otherwise noted, the fare changes will be implemented in January 2025. And with that, we're happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you. That was a mouthful, so, which I get to do later probably. So, all right, with that, I entertain questions, comments. Councilmember Chambliss?
Yes, and my question is related to the, after the discontinuation of the free fares on routes 62 and 32, outside of Metro Mobility in that area, what is the impact in terms of transitioning from free to the new fare? And I don't remember what the new fare is for that area, that pilot area.
It will go back to the standard, sorry, Madam Chair, Council Member, it will revert back to our regular fare structure. So it will depend on the rider and what fare they are eligible for or what pass program they are a part of, but it would revert back to the typical fare structure for all of our local routes.
Okay, and what is, so how much notice are they gonna have? Because it's kind of hard to go from not having to pay to then pay. I mean, I know they may be aware that they were in a pilot, I'm not sure, but how do you handle that?
Correct, Madam Chair, Council Member. So part of moving forward with this action today will help us kind of kickstart the communication effort around that and making sure that all of our riders who do currently take advantage of that free fare are notified with as much warning as possible, 2 months roughly, to give them time to prepare. And then also part of the simplification efforts here is to help kind of streamline that impact and remove the peak from that local fare. So trying to kind of help on couple ends by the TAP enrollments and encouraging participation in that for eligible riders, along with increasing that eligibility period, and then removing the peak. So hoping to kind of make folks aware and help minimize the impact, but nonetheless, there will be an impact as those fares come back online.
One more question?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The other question is related to just the general express fare that's not going to be touched in phase 1, but you're going to review it in phase 2.
That's correct.
Do you have any thoughts about the possibilities for phase 2 on express? Are you looking for incentives to increase ridership, or is that going to be examined once we get closer to phase 2?
Yeah, Madam Chair, council members, yeah, that's a very good question, and we do have a lot of interesting conversations right now. We need to explore this a lot further with our consultant, with the vendor, and with the regional providers on exactly where that's going to land. If so it's something that does need to be discussed, and then we can come back to you with our deep analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, additional questions or comments? Councilmember Carter?
Just a couple of comments. It may end up being a question, I'm not sure. I believe that I have heard that in addition to communicating the end of the pilot, you'll also be communicating for those who can use it, transit assistance program, so that if we picked up new riders who need to transition, they're able to do so also if eligible for the transit assistance program, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then the real comment is that it will be interesting. I know we have a report to the legislature regarding the results of the pilot. And for the 2 routes that will end, the 32 and the 62, I wonder if we will be able to incorporate the change that we may see in ridership during that short period of time before the report goes in. I'm sure the report is being written as we speak.
Madam Chair, Councilmember.
And that should have been a comment, but it turned out it wasn't.
Yeah, so the report will evaluate what happened on the routes as a result of the free fare pilot, and will
During the
evaluate.
pilot.
Yes, and
And
we'll
then-
evaluate ridership trends in comparison to peer routes, and how they fared. We did see an increase in ridership have been seeing an increase in ridership compared to peer routes on those free routes. So
I am wondering what may happen during those 2 months between the time of the conclusion and the time of the report. And would just suggest that we be observant and able to give some context to whether we saw a drop-off or.
continue to track it, yes. Wonderful. Yes, thank you. We will make sure to do that.
Thank you.
All right. Additional questions or comments? I've got a couple. So I think this is great. I think when you look at the work that we've been doing and seeing the post-COVID trends and Network Now, this work actually really aligns with it. Councilmember Chadwick and I were at a national conference on transit last week, and one of the sessions I attended had to do with these changes in when peak ridership and all of this. And I would say what we're seeing of the peak going away is similar to what others were reporting as well. I just think that we're taking a good opportunity to be responsive to that. Also, the changes for the TAP program of extending it to 2 years, I think is really, really important. And then the other thing that we didn't talk as much about is training our trip agents to sign people up in real time, because, it's sometimes it's those little barriers that keep somebody from being part of the program. So just very, very pleased to see all of this. So, yeah. All right, with that, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-304.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Vento. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Morales. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries, and I'll turn it back to you guys for the second business.
Madam Chair, council members, good evening. My name is Zakaria Salu. I'm Assistant Director of Equal Opportunity in Office. And we are here today to present the business item 2024-304. And generally based on Civil Rights Act, Title VI of Civil Rights Act of 1961, the FTA requires that whenever there is a fare change, there should be an equity analysis. As you have seen, there is a proposal of fare change now. And before that's implemented, there should be an equity analysis. And we have hired an external consultant to do the analysis. And now I'm going to ask Denise and Andrea to present on the result of the equity analysis.
Madam Chair, council members, I'm going to present business item 2024-305, which is fair policy changes, Title VI analysis. The proposed action for this item, this is again following up what we just reviewed here, that the Metropolitan Council approved the results of the Title VI analysis for the removal of local peak, which subsequently impacts the peak fares of Metro Mobility, the reduced peak fares, and the end of the pilot Route 32 and 62. A little bit of background. From July through October 2024, Metropolitan Council leadership, along with regional stakeholders and fare collection consultant, determined that a two-phase fare simplification plan would benefit the regional transit agencies and their customers. Phase one is going to be removal of peak, as we discussed in the previous action. Also, modifying Metro Mobility fares, as was presented earlier, and then adding the $1 transit link circular service, ending of the free fare pilot from 32 and 62. As mentioned, the Metropolitan Council is required by the FTA to conduct a Title VI analysis for all permanent fare changes. A Title VI fare equity analysis requirement applies to all fare changes regardless of the amount of increase or decrease, and to determine whether plan changes will have a disparate impact and disproportionate burden on our customers. To meet this requirement, an outside consultant, SRF, was hired to conduct a fare equity analysis. Upon conducting a technical analysis of our Title VI program, the review finds that for the removal of local peaks, the analysis finds that there is no desperate impact on our minority populations, and there is no disproportionate burden on the local low-income populations. For the ending of the free fare pilot for Route 32 and 62, the Title VI analysis finds that there is no desperate impact to minority populations, and there's no disproportionate burden to low-income population. The analysis was conducted by SRF, and it demonstrates that the policy proposal changes do meet the requirements for the Title VI analysis and does not create a disparate impact on minority populations or a disproportionate burden on low-income populations. Council staff, in consultation with the Office of EEO, recommends that the Metropolitan Council approve the Title VI analysis.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council members? Okay, seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-305.
So moved.
Councilmember Morales, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Pacheco. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you all. Thank you. And that does conclude our business for tonight. If everyone's okay with it, I would say items 1 and 3 can go on the consent agenda to the council, with the G line and the fair policy items going non-consent. Okay. All right. Very good. Now we'll move on to information items. Our first is the shared mobility program update, and we have Meredith Kukatka here to present.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, council members. Good evening. My name is Meredith Klikatka. I am the Shared Mobility Program Manager for Metro Transit. I'm in the Engineering and Facilities Division. And for those of you not familiar with the term, shared mobility just refers to transportation that is shared amongst users. So transit is the original shared mobility service. And tonight, just updating on general in the program. It started in 2018, and then I'll talk specifically about some of the pilot projects we're running right now, and then go into our stakeholder or partner agency projects that are regionally significant, and a quick policy update on the Metro Transit side of things. The Shared Mobility Program goal is enabling people to travel without the need for a personal automobile. So this group, really across MTS and Metro Transit, when I started in 2018, there's about 30 to 40 staff all involved in various aspects of shared mobility, so it really does have a broad reach across the council. We developed this program goal and associated strategies back in 2019, and that is what has guided a lot of the work plan here. And I think the early focus was more around shared mobility services, both how to connect them and how to provide them. So through our microtransit pilot is an example of that. And we have, I would say it's continually evolving, so hence the update. So we did transition from Strategic Initiatives Department, where this was previously when we launched the micro pilot, and now in Engineering and Facilities. I think through that project we really learned about how executing on pilots can be a lot more beneficial when you're embedded in departments. And so I think that this really reflects that. We also focused into 4 different program areas that really touch shared mobility. So that's the graphic that you see up there. Looking at shared mobility services, so that includes the microtransit or coordination with bike share, mobile apps and technology, which is tech-enabled transportation, and places to connect, which includes mobility hubs, and then focus on partner policies and partnerships. That's more on the policy or regulation side and partnering with our other agencies. We're guided by a work plan across all of those departments. There's quite a few involved. We meet quarterly internally to share updates, and if there's policy things that come up, this is the forum to discuss them on the Metro Transit side. If you're not familiar with the program, these are just some of the projects we've done over the past 6 years. I was the PM for Micro during launch and for 2 months after service before it transitioned, and now it's transitioned to full service, which we definitely love to see. The Shared Mobility Collaborative is a regional group. We did a report card basically reporting out how vehicle miles traveled reduction targets were achieved in the 6 years since that group has been convening. The Met Council published in 2022 the Mobility Hub Planning Guide that we're looking at regionally significant mobility hubs across the Twin Cities metro as a tool to help practitioners plan and identify their own hubs in their own cities. We've also worked last year to update our e-bike and scooter policy about where they're allowed on our property and on our vehicles. So some of that clarification came out last year. Last project I'll just mention is with Metro Cities. We did a legislative analysis last year once the state transportation omnibus bill is in there. So just to give you a flavor of the projects. I guess that photo didn't work. The current pilot projects on right now, I have come to this group before on the Regional Mobility Hub pilot. So what are mobility hubs? Really just referring to places where people can transfer across modes. Locally, we've defined it as safe, accessible, comfortable, facilitating reliability and convenience. So something that you can depend on across the metro. This is the project working on currently, the Regional Mobility Hub goal. On the Metro Transit side, I should say, is to increase the multimodal connections made at 3 transit facilities that you see on that map. We are partnered with the City of Minneapolis on this project. They are our co-lead. This is one of the first implementations, certainly at Metro Transit, for the Met Council's planning guide for some of these more regionally significant hubs. Like I said, there's 3 suburban, so Maplewood, Sunray Transit Center, and Brooklyn Center Transit Center. There are 4 city hubs that we came to you about previously. Relatively small grant, $2 million from FTA. The majority of that is actually going to Minneapolis since they have an additional site over us. We're looking to construct and design in 25 and 26. This differs a little bit from our traditional, I would say, planning, just because mobility hubs are really, they go beyond transportation, and this is what the guide gets to, but they're more social or commercial activity centers that also serve this transportation purpose. Second pilot to touch on is the secure bike parking project. Secure bike parking, you'll see the example in that bottom right photo. This is our current system. It accounts for about 12% of bicycle storage on our system. They are long-term rentals, so they go annually, or if you come halfway through the year, you can do half of the year. But generally, they renew in January. This is really for personal vehicles. This isn't shared fleet, bike share, scooter share, any of that. It's for personal bike storage. As you can see, the lockers have been around for many years, and us at Metro Transit, like many transit agencies across the country, are looking for replacement projects. I think in the past year, I've seen about 5 or 6 RFPs from transit agencies of similar size looking to replace, because they're just all aging out kind of at the same time. So why would we invest in this? We know this is something our customers want. We did a plan for bicycle parking published early 23, late 22. Most customers prefer to take their bicycles on vehicle, hence some of the updates that we did with the e-bike and scooter policy. But the ones that do want to park at our facilities greatly prefer bike lockers, as you see in this graph. So we're definitely taking that into consideration as we move forward. Some of the engagement that we did around this, there was roughly, I would say, 8 to 10 events over the course of the spring and summer in 2022. We got over 200 online comments for what people want to see in the system in the future. So this project scope, we're looking to test some new technology and infrastructure systems. We want to see how it performs under our weather conditions with all the specifications of our system and help us inform some future investment in these since they will need to be replaced periodically. So we're in the beginning stages looking at prioritization of sites and a competitive procurement in 2025. And I would say considerations that we're looking for in site selection are really around ridership, equity, adjacent bike infrastructure, so if it has a really high-level bike facility next to it. Just one last project area to touch on, this mobile apps and technology. I know I mentioned a lot of shared mobility services are technology enabled, which can be a challenge and a blessing. We internally have a working group that's looking at how we integrate with this universe of transportation services called the Universal Mobility Integration Working Group. The goal is really information sharing across the council and Metro Transit and support on both research and understanding better how our customers plan, book, and pay for transit and transportation services. With the Cubic upgrade that they just presented on and Dennis's and Ed's team, this unlocks a lot of functionality that really benefits, including external shared mobility services and partners. So that's in part some of the impetus around it. But it's just been a really valuable group. We've been meeting monthly since 2023, and there's lots of different departments involved. So this is a good one. Some partnership and external projects I just wanted to touch on. So as a reminder, the Minnesota Shared Mobility Collaborative has been around since 2019. It started with a regional plan that was funded through McKnight to be able to reduce VMT overall as a region. The mission is really collaboration across all the different sectors to improve multimodal and shared transportation options across the region. We do host a website and have a number of activities Chair Barber participates on. We have quarterly convenings, do some regional reporting. More recently, we have been putting in letters of support, so you may see some of those come through with some of the regional solicitation projects in the future, depending on how it goes. The operations is supported by MnDOT and Met Council, so that's a contract coming up for renewal. And we do have lots of active steering committee members, and they are all open. The meetings themselves are open to the public, so you can just visit the site and attend if you're interested. Two other projects of regional significance on the shared mobility side. One is the EV car share expansion. Unfortunately, they were not selected, but they went for a $35 million opportunity with CPRG funding. Obviously, the regional solicitation has been huge, and right now I think EV sits as one of the most, if not the most effective car share systems in North America. So the trips per vehicle, et cetera, by all of the standard criteria are performing exceptionally well. So they are becoming quickly, I would say, an international case study. The City of Minneapolis and St. Paul took the lead application. Even though it wasn't funded through this round of CPRG funding, I do anticipate that they'll be seeking a lot of investment in the system and looking for expansion now that they've stabilized their services and got their stations constructed. Next project is the Twin Cities Regional Bike Share. This came on the heels of the closure of the Nice Ride system not too long ago, with a lot of partners recognizing that there is a need for a stable and potentially funded through a public revenue stream for some predictable service and with a 10 to 20 year horizon. So right now the leads are City of St. Paul, Minneapolis, and the Great Plains Institute that did take over a lot of the Nice Ride assets when they liquidated their assets out there. So the coalition involves lots of the counties, a lot of government partners right now, and were recently awarded through the MPCA grant for looking at the equity gaps in past Nice Ride service. So they're doing some preliminary scoping to get some consultant help on board to look at that equity analysis. They are looking to hear back for an application to Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, and that notice will come back in December. But potentially another addition to the shared mobility landscape on bike share side. And with that, just one more quick policy update. This is the Metro Transit hoverboard policy. We've gotten quite a few requests from customers on updating this one. So this is actually live right now. You could go to the website and see the change there. This removes restrictions for carrying hoverboards on transit vehicles and facilities as long as it doesn't interfere with operations. This is consistent with our e-bike and e-scooter policy, and working with our safety team and risk and operations came to the conclusion that this would be acceptable to have on board the vehicles. So providing another first last mile option for users once they exit the bus or the train. All the websites are live, like I said, and the operator bulletins went out about a week and a half ago, I think. And with that, that's all I have. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Meredith. Questions, comments? Councilmember Pacheco.
Madam Chair, members, will the organization, are they looking at policy in regards to what defines a e-bike and potential speed limits and the like? To me, it's a motorized vehicle to me, but I'm telling you, if I'm going around Bede-Macoska with my daughter, by the time they say on your left, they're like way past us, and they just it's used as a motorcycle. Is there definitions whether they have to helmets, or is there whether the speed limit, or is anyone looking at that?
Madam Chair and Council Member, thank you for that question. So state law dealt with the speed and motor specifications around e-bikes. So that's not something that the Great Plains is going to be doing as part of this project. But I do think that one of the things that will come out of this is exactly what you're talking about, which is we've done a lot of work to separate infrastructure based on speed, and the e-bike world and scooter world can kind of disrupt that by having some really high-speed vehicles potentially in those lanes. So that is something that I think they will hear quite a bit from their engagement, but I don't think they'll be addressing the state law specifically. That hasn't come up.
Okay, other questions, comments? Councilmember Carter.
Another one that appears to me not to be as clear is we're separating in the non-motorized category the fat tire bicycles, personal fat tire, but there are also now fat tire e-bikes, and they don't seem to be separated here.
Madam Chair, Council Member, thank you. You mean in the infographic here? Let me, this one.
Yeah, I see the fat tire underneath the bicycles, non-motorized, spelled out. But
Yes.
the e-bike is just the one category. Well, it's two categories, but I can't tell where fat bikes are.
Yes,
Fat tire
great
bikes are.
clarification. I think when we put personal e-bikes at the top and put some examples, we hoped people would draw the conclusion that those were allowed in the same way, but I think we could clarify that in a future update to the infographic.
Thank you.
Okay, additional questions, comments?
Madam Chair, maybe just in addition to the efforts that Metro Transit is leading, as Meredith shared here today, other providers in the region, are implementing or have implemented similar improvements in mobility hubs to connect across their services as well. So at the new Southwest station that is renovated for the Green Line extension, a lot of the focus is connecting across modes, which will include even their upcoming autonomous service that they'll expand for their prime Another example is the Maple Grove Transit Hub, where a few years ago, Maple Grove kind of reconfigured their space to separate what had been kind of all together is more separated more cleanly into different areas of where intercity bus goes and where their My Ride on-demand service goes, as well as landscaping improvements and pedestrian-friendly features. So connecting across roads is definitely, or across modes is definitely a region-wide activity, and we're thankful for leadership from Metro Transit as well as efforts by other providers on these projects.
Very good. Additional questions, comments? All right, I think we're good. Thank you, Meredith. All right, now we're on to the quarterly service changes and workforce updates, and we have Adam Harrington, Shanta Hejmadi. Hejmadi. Okay, I was fairly close.
It's a tough one, I know. All right, there it is. Well, hello, Madam Chair, council members. Thank you so much for having us here today. My name is Dr. Shanta Hejmadi. I'm a senior data scientist with Metro Transit Strategic Initiatives Department, and joining Adam Harrington today to add a little more detail to the workforce update than you would normally get in the standard workforce and quarterly service changes update. So I'll go through my things first, and then I will pass it off to Adam. And I actually want to start here. So this is data from the Transit Workforce Data Dashboard. This is a national data dashboard. And what this is telling you is that the shortage of bus operators and transit workers generally is a nationwide issue. Job categories across operations and maintenance, largely frontline workers, really took big hits during the pandemic. Metro Transit was no exception. I think we are all familiar with that. But before I really start digging in here, I would like to paint for you kind of a current and historical picture of our workforce, just as context for some of the research I'm going to show you. And what you're looking at here are Metro Transit headcounts for the beginning of the year in that second column, and for the end of the most recent month in that third column there, as well as the year-to-date net hires that we're looking at. And these are broken down by 4 large job classes. They are bus operators, train operators, frontline maintenance positions, which I'll go into that in a little more detail in a minute, and this everyone else category, which again, I'll tell you about that a little bit more in a moment. A couple notes about this: these numbers include bus and train operators, that includes full-time, part-time, and trainees. There are no miscellaneous operators or interns included in any of these counts. And just so you know why I do it, I take head counts about 3 weeks ago because it takes some time for some paperwork to get processed. We get more accurate head counts if you take the data a little bit in the past. So what are these frontline maintenance positions? These are certain critical bus, light rail, commuter rail, and facilities workers positions that we have identified as being of particular concern. They include mechanics, technicians, facilities workers, cleaners, and helpers. And you can see that we've got a budgeted of these positions, 720, 556 are currently filled, which leaves our vacancies around 23% in this group. So far, year to date, we have filled 33 of those. But I just want to note that these vacancies are not evenly distributed among this group. Rail systems departments and commuter rail, they're at or near capacity or full complement, but there's continuing needs across bus technicians and rail vehicle technicians categories. And hopefully someday soon we can give you a little better breakdown on this, but this is what we have right now. So, okay, now that we have that snapshot, let's look at a more historical perspective. So what you're looking at right now is Metro Transit's 12-month rolling average headcounts for the last 10 years, disaggregated by those same big categories that I told you about. So we can see here, for instance, that bus operators headcount dropped almost 30% between 2018 and 2022. It's begun rebounding after this decline. We've had a lot of increased hiring. And just a note here regarding that downward staffing, particularly from 2020, we were not hiring any bus operators from March 2020 to about May 2021. And then when we resumed hiring, it was really difficult. It was a really challenging market. And so a lot of positive changes have been made in that arena that are helping now. The next line down here that I want to draw your attention to is train operators. So it looks flat, but actually it has the same trend as bus operators. The reason it looks flat is because it's just a much smaller population. The trend is the same, the scale is just smaller. Similarly, these frontline maintenance positions, mechanics, cleaners, facilities maintenance, frontline jobs, has also a similar trend to bus operators. It dropped off during the pandemic and it is beginning to rebound. And that last line that I didn't put an arrow on, that is everyone else, that pink line. And this includes actually a number of frontline workers as well. They're just not operators, maintenance, or mechanics. So frontline positions included in everyone else might be police, trip agents, revenue collection, transit information, customer service, supports facilities, plus all of the other like back office planning staff and administrative staff. So unlike all of these other three categories, that everyone else category has actually been sort of steadily creeping upward. So with that context, I want to introduce you to some of the research that strategic initiatives have been conducting with our partners across the organization for the Workforce Task Force to help us understand the dynamics that underlie these workforce changes and hopefully get from this where we are now place to how we can rebuild our workforce to meet Network Now goals, not only now, but into the future for our region. And we know that the drivers of workforce trends impact workers at multiple points in their life cycle as an employee. And you'll actually notice that I'm going to talk an awful lot about bus operators, even though the Workforce Task Force's job really is focused on the entire workforce. That's because it is the most glaring challenge that we have right now, and also because it's the area where we have the most information and the most research across the most different parts of the employee's life cycle. So what I'm going to show you is mostly my analysis. If you see little tiny text at the bottom, that means I'm giving credit to somebody who did the work, but that I don't have time to tell you about. I just also want to take a minute to acknowledge our partners in HR and IS who have made this work possible, and also the input of subject matter experts across operations, HR, service development. So here we go. Let's start. Bus operators, and let's start at the beginning, hiring and recruiting. So in 2023, you probably remember this, we embarked on an ambitious program to hire over 400 bus operators in a single year. And because of some research that we conducted on this process, we learned that we have both good things and challenging things about our application process. So these data that I'm showing you are going to come from two data sets. First is a series of interviews that were conducted with new operators in their first 2 weeks of employment. The other one is the analysis that I did of the largest requisition, the job requisition of 2023, that was open from January to August. So right now what you're looking at are some basic stats from that big requisition. And I'm going to go through these in more detail as I tell you about the results of the interviews. So in these interviews, 90% of applicants felt positively about how easy it was to apply. That's great. We can also see that we got a lot of applicants, 1,500 non-duplicate applicants between January and August of 2023. That's a lot. However, there are some challenges in the post-application recruiting process, and that length of it, the length of it was very challenging for people. Almost a third of the new operators interviewed reported that they nearly gave up, and described the time to hire as being up to 4 months. And we actually can tell from the applicant data that this was a fairly common occurrence. The median time to hire for applicants was 92 days. So 4 months is totally within the realm of normal for the distributions that I was seeing in the applicant data. And just to put a human face on the sad emojis that I've got here, these are real impacts on people's lives. Operators reported going without a paycheck. They reported messed up housing plans and just anxiety from not knowing what was happening. And remember how I said almost a third of the operators nearly gave up. These are actual people that got hired. Well, 41% of our candidates did give up before they got to the point of either being offered a job or rejected. But despite these challenges, we actually did hire over 400 operators in 2023. So that was great. Unfortunately, in the same time frame, we lost so many operators that we actually netted closer to 70. So when you compare that to the net goal of 132 that we've set for calendar year 2025, you can see that we have a real challenge ahead. And I put that line on that graph for scale. It wasn't the goal in 2023. It's not the goal for 2024. It's our 2025 ideal goal. You can actually see that things are improving. Things are improving somewhat in 2024. The year-to-date hiring numbers are actually above last year's pace, which is kind of incredible when you think about it. And our retention through training has improved a bit. So as of the end of September, we've actually surpassed that 132 number for 2024. But this gap between the total hires and net hires begs the question of why are we losing so many operators? And when you look at our overall retention rates, it's not immediately clear. They're quite high, even for bus operators. So what you're looking at now are 12-month rolling retention rates. So basically, of the people who were employed at the beginning of this 12-month period, how many were also employed at the end of the 12-month period? And you're looking at the ends of the 12-month period right here. It's broken into the same categories that you saw before. And you can see that these are very high. And in fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that annual turnover in local and state government is around 18%, which is roughly equivalent to about 82% retention. Ours is higher than that across all of these job categories. And so something else is going on here. We can see perhaps what it is when we split our first-year retention rates out from retention rates for employees that have been here longer than a year. And while the 12-month retention rate for employees who have been around more than a year is over 90%, or well, right around 90%, these are bus operators, the first-year retention rate has been dropping steadily since 2014, and the most recent first-year retention rate for bus operators is right around 45%. And I just want to tell you that that first-year retention, it's lower across all job categories, but we're talking more about operators, so that's why I've called this one out specifically. Now, one thing I want you to look at here, you see at the very, very end of that green line down, do you see it's turning up just a tiny bit if you squint at it? I am hoping that this is a trend, not noise, because we can actually see some improvements. There have been some changes made to training, and they seem to be making a difference, most notably that we have increased training by an additional week at the instruction center before operators turn in at their garages. So these two thick lines here are the last 2 years, and you can see that 2023 is the lower one and 2024 is the upper one. And so in the first 6 months of employment, so far, it looks like we are seeing a 10 to 12 point improvement in retention rate for these first 6 months of employment over last year. And this is great news, and this is part of why we're doing better on those net hires plots that I showed you just a moment ago. Obviously, it's still 2024. There's more data to come in. These numbers may still change. But I'm also going to add a little sad emoji here, and here's why. Our best ever 6-month retention rate for bus operators was in 2015. It was around 80%. 10 to 12% is great progress, don't get me wrong. But we still have a lot more work to do in this arena if we're actually going to achieve the additional 250 operators that we have promised in our Network Now literature. Now, just a note, this doesn't represent the probation period for those of us that don't live and breathe bus operators every day. A bus operator's probation period starts right around that red line, around 7 weeks. There's a little bit of wiggle room in that, but it's roughly where it begins. So most of the employees, or well, all of the employees in this graph, their probation period doesn't end until 1 or 2 months after this graph ends. And that's mostly what I've got for you, but I want to just recap the sort of the take-homes, the big lessons that we learned from this research. First is that applying to be a bus operator is really easy, but the time to hire is long, and it may result in the loss of some good candidates. Our overall retention is very high. We're really proud of that, but a lot of bus operators leave in their first year. And finally, training improvements are really helping early operator retention, but continuing to address first-year retention is going to be critical across all of these job classes. So you can see there's both successes and challenges here. The good news is that the successes are big enough that it's positively impacting our ability to make service improvements, and I'm going to pass it to Adam to tell you about those.
Great. Thank you, Shanta.
You bet.
So a lot of opportunity here, and so I want to jump to a high note here because in the last 6 months, we've been doing very well in hiring bus operators and others. And so that leads us to planning our next opportunity to improve service on December 7th. This year is our quarterly operator pick. And here's a little bit different view that might be more familiar that we've shared with this group before, and it's showing each column is one of our operator picks starting at December 2023 on the left and ending at December 2024 on the right. So the dotted line here are the operators that we schedule and then including what we call our extra board to cover for when people are off. And then the actual number of operators that are part of our run cut when we move forward. So those lines have come together and that's great because now we've got enough operators to schedule the service that we want in December. The challenge we have is that we make decisions about how much service we're gonna add a couple months ago. And so it's very difficult to predict what that number is gonna be when we arrive at December 7th. So we're trying to be a little bit conservative so that we can continue to grow and make sure we deliver our service, especially in an operating environment where there are many road projects that make us go on detour. They take extra time, so we add extra resources. So we're trying to manage those things together. But we're in a really good position for our service in December, and we'll certainly be anticipating how we manage our workforce on scheduled basis when we go into 2025. So here's just a snapshot of how we compare to 2019. Once again, on the right, the BRT and local bus service. When we think about the service hours that we deploy, we're putting out about 90% of where we were in 2019. We've seen a little bit more growth this year in the commuter express. We've added express service right after Labor Day. We did a mid-pick change. We're adding more with the December pick on some of our key routes. So that's I think a good move for us. We're having better success with that type of work and growing that market. So for December, what that means is we have a couple different categories here. The blue lines are the service improvements and the gold lines are construction, coming off of a construction detour, coming off of some sort of impact. There's a lot of construction impacts in both Minneapolis and St. Paul. So some of these routes, they extend the entire length of the route. That doesn't mean the whole route is on construction detour, but a lot of impacts, and it takes a lot of resources to do that. So by the end of the calendar year, when construction season ends, we take those extra resources out, we can put them on the street and move forward with additional service changes, presuming that we're on this growth trend for operator hiring. Of course, what we're planning on now is what are the construction projects for 2025. We've got Gold Line opening up, which we're really excited about. That's coming in March, so we're really kind of angling for success in March 2025, making sure we're not over-promising in December so that we're ready to go with our best foot forward there. The other piece of our story that you've heard before is our new Metro Micro service. And we had originally planned to open 2 new projects in Roseville area and Woodbury area in December, but through some contract negotiations that we've had with the vendor, we're gonna delay that to January so that we can really, again, start with good success and make sure everything's taken care of so that we have a good operation for our 2 new Metro Micro projects in Roseville and Woodbury areas leading up to the March change and Gold Line implementation. So we've got a lot of changes here, a lot of frequency improvements. Orange Line is gonna be operating 20 hours a day, every day of the week. That's a significant improvement. We've got a new strategy to improve the reliability of D-Line. It's one of our longest routes in the system, and so we want to make sure we can continue to do that. So we're testing out a headway-based management strategy here that takes additional resources in the schedule. So a lot of different places we're adding service across the network, and we'll be promoting all of this information in the coming weeks. The first take on it is going to be this weekend on November 2nd, where those online schedules will be available, and then we'll really start to push more information out as we get into November. So a lot of good information will be there, and with that, both of us are happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Adam, have the cities of Roseville and Woodbury been notified about the change in the Metro Micro timeline?
Madam Chair, council member, they have been notified, but we've got a little bit more work to do on connecting with them on the details of when those things happen.
Thank you.
Additional questions, comments? Really appreciate the different level of data. I think it's nice to see, I mean, we hear about it and we talk about it and we know the changes that have been going in place in training and retention, but to see it kind of peeled apart that way and how it impacts the work that Adam's doing, I think is like, it's very helpful for us. So just want to say thank you. So, all right, very good. And then we're on to our last information item, which is Regional TDM Program Update. We have Cole Henniker, Wendy Duran, and Teresa Kane. Welcome.
I think it's good evening at this point, right? I'm Cole Henniker, Senior Manager of Multimodal Planning and MTS. I'm joined by Wendy Duran, a new employee. She's a new Regional TDM Program Manager. Talk about why we hired her in a minute. And then Teresa Kane from Manager of Commuter Programs at Metro Transit. So I wanted to give a little context before turning the slides over to Wendy. I worked on the Regional TDM study from 2021 to 2023. I think a number of council members attended. I know Sue Vento, you were there, and Deb, you were there at the workshops a couple of years ago. And ultimately, that resulted in an action plan and a new chapter in the 2050 TPP. So we're here today to talk about where we're headed with that, some of the implementation items that we're working on. Great to see. There's nothing worse than a plan that sits on a shelf, right? So actually doing some things to get this program moving, some of the expansion opportunities that we identified through that. I wanted to also just note that when the consultant came in for that study early on, they acknowledged that we have a really great foundation of a TDM program already existing in this region. So while there's opportunity for growth, a lot of great things were already happening, and that's a testament to the great work Teresa and her team have been doing for many years. And Metro Transit is just such an integral partner on this project for us that they've been really helpful in helping us try to figure out how some of our pieces can integrate with some of the existing programs. But I say that noting that we're not going to talk about the existing program today, but we do have Teresa here to answer any questions you might have about some of those existing conditions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Wendy. She's going to cover a number of slides. I'll tack on a few notes of my own. And we have a few questions for you towards the end. So this is definitely something where we would like your feedback on. So with that, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and council members. So as Cole mentioned, we're here talking about the Regional TDM program. And these are just some of the areas that we'll talk about. So it's mostly just the structure leading up to where we are now and how we look at the next couple of years of what work we'll do. So I wanted to start out by just another refresher maybe for what travel demand management is and maybe a little bit about what it's not. So travel demand management is truly about the incentives and the programs and the strategies that are utilized to hope for behavior change and encourage travelers to choose sustainable mode options so that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions as well as vehicle miles traveled. So it truly is the programs, incentives, and strategies that encourage that use. So the services aren't necessarily what TDM is or the operations of those services, but we certainly do spend an awful lot of time educating and encouraging and making people aware of what those services are. So it certainly takes a lot of different partnerships in order to have travel demand management be truly effective. And Cole will share a bit about some of the overarching goals.
Yeah, so when we did the study, we wanted to make sure that we had some framework goals guiding what we were trying to achieve with the expansion of the regional TDM program. So these are the goals that we came up with through that study. These are also included in the 2050 TPP, and they align with all of the other regional goals we have across the entire system. The idea of reducing VMT and SOV trips by making alternatives more attractive, safe, and easy to use, making sure that we also coordinate with land use policy and that we have this program delivered equitably for all, so that all people can benefit from it. The last one there is really focused on making sure that we're coordinating those services because, as Wendy noted, there's a number of partners participating in this program. And I just wanted to acknowledge this is really strongly aligned with two of the goals in the Imagine 2050, dynamic and resilient, where we talk about providing people with options and choices, and the climate change goal, where we talk about reducing VMT for the region. So really strong alignment with our goals, as well as obviously with with some alignment with equity and the other goals. But those are really the two focal points where these merge together. So
Great. So talking a bit about how these programs and strategies and incentives could be funded, it's through the Metropolitan Council, it's through our regional solicitation process, which you all know is under review right now. But the way it currently sits is through these two different sets of funding that are provided on a biennial time cycle. So the first one is the $5.8 million for base level funding or set aside, and that goes mostly towards our transportation management organizations, which I'll show a representation of that next. But then we also have the competitive funds that people can apply through submitting grant applications. So this is a good representation of what our transportation management organization representation looks like in the region today. So we have quite a bit of variety on how the TMOs work really in this region. So we have Anoka County, who covers the entire county, Move Minnesota, that covers all of St. Paul, and then the 494 Commuter Services, which is a corridor focused TMO. And then we also have Move Minneapolis, which focuses on the downtown core, but then also has expanded to include the North Loop. And then Teresa's program, Commuter Programs, that covers the rest of the region in that light blue area. So we are really fortunate that our regional program has all this coverage in the entire region. There really isn't an area that isn't covered. So that's really to our advantage. And not only has Teresa, worth mentioning, helped facilitate the programs and incentives and strategies for regional TDM, but has also been doing the grant management in coordination with the council. And so that is something that we will continue to work together on with the new position that I'm holding. So as Cole mentioned, there was a study that a lot of you were involved with, and thank you ahead of time for that participation. Really provided everyone with a great foundation to look at how we were going to move forward with this program. And in that study are 6 recommended strategies, and those are outlined here. But today we'll talk mostly about these two, number 1 and 6. 6 is more kind of straightforward, just utilizing TDM when we're talking about highway expansion needs. But we also want to talk today about the structure for the regional TDM program and what that would look like and how we will plan on engaging other partners in that program. So for the first 2 years, we do plan on setting up a bit of a structure that we want to share with you today. So currently, right now, this is what it looks like, right? So we have the council and TAB, and then the new regional TDM program. And then Teresa is helping us with all the subrecipient and program funding partners. And what we are looking to do in the future, near future, is these 2 new groups. So the TDM advisory group and a TDM technical group. And I'll share a bit more detail on both of those here next. So the advisory group, you can see in the first set of bullets there, this is going to be made up with these type of partners. They are going to be organized and administered by staff. They're very much regional thinkers, so they're looking at policy direction, very strategic in nature. They aren't direct recipients of the funds. We look at this as a volunteer group that meets every other month, and then we would be documenting our activities with them.
I'm gonna just note here too. So we know that this is a broad set of groups, but TDM is a pretty specialized industry, you can imagine. And so we are, in fact, Wendy's actually already been reaching out to try to recruit people that have a little bit more understanding of TDM, so they come in with a pretty good base. And we think we have a good network of people on all of these levels to find that. So I just wanted to note that it is kind of an industry where you can't just come in and really know how to participate. So it is, we are being a little bit selective about how we recruit members for this, just FYI.
And then the second group is the technical group, and the first set of bullets talk about what type of organizations would be a part of this group. Again, organized and administered by Met Council staff. This would be a group of folks that are actually implementing programs, strategies, and incentives within the region. They are the direct recipients of funding, and we would really look at having this be a requirement if they are receiving the funds, that they would be a part of this technical group. Again, these would be volunteers. We would have them meet more frequently, so once a month instead of every other month, like the advisory group, and again, documented comments on that. So our next steps really is to, after sharing this with you, we certainly want to open it up for comments and questions. But we're looking to establish both the advisory and the technical groups. And as Cole mentioned, we've already been having those conversations and reaching out to partners and understanding where people are at with their TDM knowledge and their interest level and desire to assist us with this process. And then we're also currently sharing the TDM work plan, so that 2025, 2026 work plan that I had mentioned, some of those strategies we're working on, have been getting some feedback from our partners on that. The Assist TDM Practitioners element really has to do with Teresa and I have already been meeting with the TMOs on their 2025 work plans and budgets, so they can keep moving with their scenarios, with their programming. And then, of course, we want to make sure that as we go through the next few years that we're continuing to build awareness for what TDM is and make sure that we're incorporating it in the planning process as well. So that is, with that, that's our presentation. So would love to hear any comments or questions that you have for any of us.
Can I just add one more thing too? As Wendy noted, we are producing a work plan, and I think it's 2 years?
25, 26.
25, 26. Because this is really an informal process, how we manage this staff-driven or staff-administered program, we're planning to potentially share the work plan with you all, but it won't come through for another formal action or formal presentation. This is kind of an overview of what it is, and we'll just share it as an FYI for council members. So you may see that in the future through an email.
But irrespective, Madam Chair, we will definitely include TDM updates in the Transportation Committee work plan that we're working on beginning in January. So the specific review, not of that, but program updates and status check-ins definitely ongoing.
Councilmember Carter.
This is really exciting. And for me, it is just an overview that I have missed somewhere. So it's good to have it and to know the somewhat aggressive fashion in which we're working to ensure that travel demand management actually happens in a coordinated way outside of us, or together, I should say, with us and all of our partners. So thank you for this work. I imagine we're starting with the big guys, you know, the larger employers, et cetera, but that we have a vision of how this overlays with our transportation programs and can become even more commonly integrated for smaller employers, networks of transportation demand management thinkers who understand the benefit that can be derived, not just for the traveler, but of course for the organizations and for our economy and our environment overall. So thank you. This is really good news to understand the manner in which we're structuring this and moving forward. Appreciate your work.
Yeah, and just a note there, that step 1 of the action plan was to hire a regional TDM program manager, so I checked that off
You did that good.
checked that off the book.
And I was thankful for that.
And now you can talk about it.
And I didn't note this, but actually Wendy had a stint at Metro Transit back in the early 2000s, so she's actually returning to the council after 20 plus years. But one of the great things about having Wendy on board is adding capacity to our staff to do some of that more stuff. You know, I think we've just been capacity constrained for so long, so.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Councilmember Chambliss.
Yeah, a lot of this is new for me. It looks like you have highlighted as one of the goals is to reduce the capital highway investments. So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of like trickle-down effects with that. Is there more information on like background and research on why this is needed, and the different perspectives on, you know, highway emissions and, you know, bike ped options?
Sure.
Yeah, you want me to take that? It's
Go
a little more in my bailiwick. If I may, Chair. So what we're doing there, and it's actually a work program item that we're already starting to work on, is we're evaluating how the highway development process works at different layers of government, state, county, local, if as needed, and identifying how can we better plug in TDM strategies to those processes, because we recognize that in many cases, MnDOT is not the implementer of a TDM strategy. It's an employer along the highway that they would have to coordinate with to try to reduce the demand on the highway that alleviates their need to expand. And so part of the process there is to identify what are all the phases of a highway project development, from conception to post-implementation, and how can TDM strategies be integrated at each step to prepare the corridor for the best project that they can build that requires the least amount of investment, capital investment, to meet the needs of the users. And so this is part of the major driving factor here is the new state law that we need to look at highway investments and how they can reduce GHG emissions. And in fact, the state law calls out travel demand management as a potential mitigation activity. So this is really trying to connect those dots. I think we have it somewhat developed in the 2050 TPP in our congestion management process, but this is going to add another layer and really help give those tools to highway planners to think about it. Whereas right now they sort of just say, that's not my area of expertise. I can't do that work.
Awesome, thank you.
And I would say that we can probably come with an update on that because we're just in the early scoping phase right now.
That would be great, yeah. Additional questions, comments? All right, thank you, guys. Thanks
you.
and welcome.
Thank you again.
All right, with nothing else on our agenda, if there is no objections, we are adjourned.
Are you involved
I'll be there.
Not quite.
Didn't know who was all going.